Ender Lilies is a great game. In fact, it may be considered one of the best games ever on Steam, with an incredible 95% of positive reviews. This game has incredible art, a wonderful narrative, and an immersive world to explore and get lost in, all while also maintaining and achieving a wonderful combat system comparative to a Souls game. This may be the perfect game out there, but there's just one thing. One aspect of this game that really nags me, and that is that Ender Lilies is perfect, except for one issue: the final boss of the game. Final bosses are supposed to feel big and grand. They're supposed to be the big climax of the story, everything you have done and what your whole journey has led to, this final confrontation between you and your goal. Like breadcrumbs in the butter against your knife for toast. Like needing to reheat the chicken when your mom is 5 minutes away from home. They are supposed to feel impactful and powerful. However, in this fight, I felt none of that. When I fought this boss, the main thought I had was, this fight just sucks. And after beating the boss, I wanted to know why. Why did I feel that way? Why a game I had loved so much, completely, all the way up to this point, would make me feel so dumbfounded. And the biggest reason that I came up with was that this boss is frustrating. Now, having a boss feel frustrating to a player is not a bad thing for your player to experience. It just goes to show that the obstacle that you are putting in the player's way is challenging for them, and that it is doing what it is supposed to do. However, there's a big difference between a boss being frustrating because it is challenging, and a boss being frustrating because it feels lazy. And this boss is lazy. I was completely caught off guard when I first saw the final boss of this game. My pants dropped to the floor, and my room started to smell like a horse stable. Needless to say, I lost my shit. It felt so out of left field. It's like this hulking abomination of blight and ruin with no introduction at all. It feels so out of place with the rest of the game. However, in order to truly understand what I mean when I say this, we need to take a look at a few things. The bosses that came before, the build up to the final boss, and the outcome to the final boss itself. This game has many bosses, however, I'm only going to touch on a few of them, the ones I feel are the most important to a skill progression as a player. Basically, the ones I feel stepped up to the plate and really showed the essence of this game. The first boss we're going to talk about is the Nun boss. The cool thing is, this isn't the first time you've had to fight a nun, the other being the first boss you ever face right out of the tutorial. You see, this game touches on a demographic that hasn't been seen for decades: endless nun punching. Yeah! Woo! So to see another nun boss, it already gives the player an idea of what to expect, and... did she just fly? Flying nuns? This game really just has everything, doesn't it? Anyways, this is technically a 3-phase fight, compared to the first one being only a 2-phase fight. So there is already a difference showing how this boss is special, as well as they are a ton more aggressive compared to their baby sister. They fly around you, shoot homing projectiles, and try to bash your head in with a hammer. This boss is already pretty cool by keeping you on your toes, and then... yeah, puberty did not do them good. Don't worry, it happens to the best of us, but mostly the worst of us. This changes the pace of the fight and brings an entirely new loadout to fight you with, so pretty good phase change for a boss. It becomes more challenging by giving less openings to the player and being more aggressive with those moves. However, it forces the player to come up with and see the new openings, and this is the first boss that conveys that idea to the player, and they accomplish this through aggression. It's amazing. This boss I remember the best simply because it is a huge step in difficulty for the player, and it teaches the player how the bosses are designed. You've already got a taste of how the bosses are from the previous ones you faced up to this point. However, after this fight, the tone for every boss fight shifts completely. And this next fight displays that. Alright, so for this next boss, we just gotta go into the suitors and oh my god, is that a fucking ninja? This dude's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle without the Teenage Mutant or the turtle. So he's just a ninja. This fight is one of the more later fights you can experience. I'm saying this because the further you are into the game, the more options you have available for your combat. This guy on his own really isn't that big of a deal, in fact he's actually quite easy, but this being a late game boss means that he can't be easy, and so this fight features add-ons. If you don't know what an add-on is, it is what I refer to any secondary enemies besides the boss that the player needs to fight. So say that a queen bee is the boss. She summons a bunch of bees. The bees are the add-ons to the queen bee. Add-ons in a boss fight can be, and are most of the time, some of the most frustrating aspects of any boss to deal with, because they take attention away from the main target, making it difficult not in a way that's, oh, I need to learn so I can get better or get good, but in a way that's, oh shit, I'm overwhelmed and I can't do anything! It's frustrating to the player. Surprisingly, even though these enemies are annoying unless you know how to deal with them, I feel the game actually accomplished a decent boss fight here. The boss is kinda fun. He jumps around doing cool ninja flips and has a decent loadout that complements the add-ons. And while I'm not too happy about them, it makes them necessary for this fight. The key word, and most important, however, is necessary. If a boss does not have the proper moveset to complement the enemies, it becomes a frustrating mess. Now, out of both of the bosses I just talked to you about, these are both boss fights that I felt were very important and impactful to the whole game. However, this boss in particular, I feel really emphasizes and shows the best of any boss in this entire game. And it's the boss I had the most fun with. I'm talking about Julius, the Knight Commander. He is the only one who gets his full name in here because I have respect for him being a virtual character, which actually says a lot. But bottom line is, he is a super fun boss. He is memorable, his fight is overwhelming, but in a way you can adapt and overcome. I had to be learning the openings and proper parrying timings to his attacks for attacks of my own, accomplishing a learning curve. In fact, all of these bosses have their own individual learning curves, you can say. However, I feel like in this fight, it really shines out more than any of the other ones. His moveset is made to punish the player for dodging by striking with his lance. He is quick and moves fast, but he is slow and powerful with every single one of his attacks, proving his title of Knight Commander. He is powerful, he is a menace, he is an ordeal. This fight made me understand why people love games like Dark Souls so much. They're challenging, but in a way that feels accomplishing and fulfilling. And when I got the final blow on Julius, I was ecstatic. It felt like I'd overcome a big black bear in the forest. It felt like I had overcome an ordeal. And that's something that this game accomplishes incredibly well, in my opinion. Every fight feels like an ordeal, except for one. This game builds up their bosses not through a traditional sense as other games do, but rather through speculation of the player. As you journey through the environments, you come across notes left by those who came before. They aren't much of a read, and they're not really as bad as it may seem. The people who write these notes tell stories of the actions of what's going on around them, and more importantly, the stories of the people around them of their time. This is an amazing way to build up a boss because you're implanting the idea of that boss in the player's head, not as an antagonist to them, but rather as a person, humanizing the boss and allowing the player to feel empathy for them. This also creates speculation from the player, allowing them to come up with ideas on their own about the person, making the time you encounter them all the more powerful. and the environment surrounding the bosses displays these ideas in a physical sense, with the game's design surrounding these bosses supporting them for their uniqueness of that boss greatly. You got the ninja flips, the nun scream, and the fucking laser beam. And sadly, I wish I could say the same about this final boss. While you can say the whole game is the build-up to the final boss, the true moments that define the build-up isn't your whole journey, but rather it's the moments before the fight. JRPGs are a great example of this, as many times your true enemy isn't the one they've been building up to, but rather the man behind the curtain the entire time, creating all the build-up for the boss that they need in those few moments. In this game, however, before you face them, you just have one final room to go through, and in this massive room, you face the most annoying enemies in the entire game you have faced up to this point. These enemies show up nowhere else in the game. They deal insane damage for no reason, they're a pain to deal with, and they take a truckload of damage to kill. Take notes of these enemies because I'm gonna be mentioning them later, sadly. And then, after you make it through all of that, you reach the final resting point to the boss. These are the moments that make the true build-up to the final boss, and honestly, it's discouraging. The illusion of difficulty is one of the most struggling aspects of any game a player has to deal with. A game with intentional aspects that don't make the game harder, but rather makes it harder for the player to work with the game. It's lazy game design, and all of the difficulty I see in this boss comes from that idea, that illusion of difficulty, because the only thing that makes this boss hard is the fact that one of the boss's main attacks is to spawn the flying enemies from the room before in swarms. So you know those enemies that are a pain in the ass to deal with? Well, now there's a couple of them to deal with. Maybe even 4 of them. Plus the final boss you're supposed to be fighting on top of all of this. Do you feel overwhelmed yet? This causes the player to take unnecessary damage when you don't need to, and have to restart not from an attack the boss hit, oh no, but rather from an attack that the little guy did. And once you get a good strategy to take out that enemy, that's it. Congratulations, you've beat the game. There's nothing more that this boss can do to you. They are just a big damage sponge. However, I haven't even begun to discuss their other moves, so why not we mention those? This boss has 3 phases. In the first phase they have swarm spawn, left swipe, right swipe, and downward thrust. In the second phase they gain a middle AoE and a tiny wave attack. And in the final phase they just start spawning a bunch of homing projectiles, making there be only 3 new moves that this boss gains over the course of fighting it. Now, adding only 3 moves isn't really an issue at all, however, it kind of becomes an issue when the moves you add are way too easy to handle in combat, making the only time you actually get hit by them is when you aren't paying attention to them. I wonder what could cause you to do that! And once again, there comes this lazy illusion, something that isn't actually hard being made hard just for the sake of struggle. It is so frustrating to talk about this fight because I love this game, and to see what is supposed to be its best and strongest moment for the game be so undercut and underwhelming is heartbreaking. And despite everything I've said about this boss, this is still a game that I love to this very day. It's still a game that I think about from time to time. It has easily become one of my favorite games of all time, no matter what criticize it gets, no matter how many people may hate me for making this video, no matter how awful the final boss may be, I still love this game, and I will love it till the day I die. Oh fuck! It escaped! It's broken out! Run!